To Dr. Geyers, thank you very much. And David, it was wonderful. I've heard you in a DVD before, and I was here trying to find more. This particular database, DVEXI, they talk about, is it a database for people that are planning on doing research, or is it a database for people that are looking for scientific reference on medical dental issues? I had one time a Hersey Medical Center medical school database on my fingertips, and I could enter there and look at research done. But it was only because my daughter worked there and then she moved on. So I'm looking for another source of scientific facts and research and data, and I didn't know if this would qualify.
It's a primary research database, meaning that it's for people to do research in it. People will be able to apply online and be able to access the data, the raw data we're talking about, to do scientific studies. So it's really for hypothesis testing.
Okay. So mostly on testing is what you're saying?
Yes, not what, there may eventually over time, as people do research, there will be, I think, articles and data that is highlighted from the database, but it's primarily designed to allow researchers to do primary research. That's the idea.
Is it something available to me to get in and out of?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a question, you know, a hypothesis, it could be anything. You know, this thing is linked to that thing, and you have reason you want to study whether it really is or not, and how likely, what the statistics are. It's open to anybody who wants to test a hypothesis.
Will be shortly.
Or will be. It's not open yet, but it will be in a few months.
I'd like to ask you a question. So this means that when this is up and running, that I can go and ask a simple question like, what is the correlation of hepatitis B shot on the day of birth with autism, risk of autism, risk of attention deficit or whatever?
Yes, it'll be very simple to do that. To do a study like that, you would select the years that you wanted to look at, and then you'd select the diagnosis, autism, you select your exposure, hepatitis B vaccine, and then you'd use the interface to look at autism that occurred after hepatitis B vaccine and compare those who got that vaccine versus not. What was the rate of autism?
You'd have to decide whether you want to do case control or what method you want to use. And you know, when you started doing it, it'd be a little more complex because you might want to see, well, 1 shot of hepatitis B, 2 shots, 3 shots, to see if it's, you know, proportional number of shots. But yeah, very simple. You get the answer today.
Minutes.
Minutes, yeah.
I'm very proud that the IAOMT funded this. You know, because I've got a question I always wanted to ask. What is the risk of a mother getting amalgam fillings removed or replaced during pregnancy with the development of autism in that child? This is something that maybe this would allow us to pull it out if we looked, and I think that could be very damning.
Thank you. I also was looking for one quick answer for Dr. Flekas. You had mentioned a DHEA, and you said it was over the counter. But I felt like you were speaking to me when you talk about some of the aspects. Can you tell me a source of over the counter and what name it goes under or what you would consider?
There's a company out there called Complementary Prescriptions, and you can buy the DHEA from that company, and you tell them that you're a doctor, and they can give you good pricing for being a physician.
Okay, thank you.
So, but it's called Complementary Prescriptions, and with being an older doctor, you probably should take about 50 milligrams a day. For anybody less than 50, usually 25 milligram a day would be best. You're welcome.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Geiger. In your the work that you presented here, you probably mentioned it or so, but I probably overheard. I didn't catch it. But what is the risk factor? Because I saw a lot of syndromes that you showed, but what is the risk factor of developing 2 syndromes or more? Did you look at that?
You mean more than one syndrome?
Yeah, if there's a higher risk or a risk of developing 2 syndrome instead of just, you presented data for 1 syndrome, but what about 2 or more?
We could look at that. We didn't. If they're fairly common, you could look at it. If they're independent, but just dependent on the thimerosal, let's say one is 100, one in 100, one is 1 in 100, it might be fairly rare, like 1 in 10,000, they're both, but you certainly could look at it. You got a better answer?
The even more important question, I think, what you're trying to get at, is something that we try to ask in, let's take autism as something I know really simply. In autism, a fair number of them have GI problems. So you have autism plus GI disturbance. Is the GI problem linked to the autism, or is it just something that happens to occur along the way? So it would be an example of, is there a variant of the disease? So if we were studying, let's say, chronic fatigue syndrome, is there a variant without GI complaint versus one with? So you could do that kind of study. And you could even get more technical, which is maybe there are symptoms that precede. And this fascinates me, again, in autism, what we're calling pre-comorbidities. In other words, if you have GI problem, let's say at age 1, does that increase your risk of eventually being diagnosed with autism? Is it more common?
We hear all the time from our autism parents that before their child developed autism, they had more ear infections, more GI problems, what else? And the question is, those are fairly urinary tract infections, and the question is that really a risk factor? In other words, lots of kids have those. Do they really have more than those who aren't going to develop? So that can easily be determined. That's before they get the diagnosis of autism. Then, of course, you can look afterwards as well and see what happens to them afterwards. Do they get more seizures? That's when we know, it's pretty well published, that their odds of getting seizure goes up about 100-fold. So you can look before, after, during, any way. These things that we showed have operators. It asks you before, during, after, not, with and without, 2 at a time, 3 at a time, any number you want, any combination you can think of. The computer will obey your orders. It's called Boolean algebra. You can have any of those things, and it'll search with those parameters and give you the answer.
Hope that was helpful.
So, Geyers, you said that you are now denied access by the CDC to these kind of databases, but you don't seem to be too unhappy. What's going on?
Well, I think in a certain way it's like a red badge of courage, meaning that it shows that we're having our effect. If we publish the studies and they didn't matter or people didn't care about what we were doing, they just let it go water under the bridge. But it's obvious that the powers that be are extremely displeased at what we're showing, and they know it's right, and they know we have access to the data, and we've seen this before. Their answer is always the same. It's not, let's have a scientific dialogue, let's not both be able to publish. They have the power, we don't, so throw those that dissent out.
But one of the reasons we're not too upset is, of course, we've been in there and we got a ton of data out. We have so much data that we probably never can get it all published, but we still like to go back. And the fact that they raised this red flag, they may be sorry at this point. We got most of the data. There's always a new thing we think of we could do. And now they're opening themselves to public ridicule and litigation. How dare they say that we can't go in there when we've done nothing wrong except they don't like the result. And the result was published in a peer-reviewed journal, and they said, in multiple peer-reviewed, and they said, well, nobody believes that. So we sent them a list. I think it's 187 publications now, that not of ours, but of everybody's, that show that thimerosal is clearly linked to autism. So we're not exactly, one couple guys in a basement. There are people all over the world doing this, and whether you think it's right or wrong, you don't suppress science. And they're trying to say, we're the only ones that ever saw that. You're crazy. I mean, it's coming out once a week. Somebody that we don't even know is publishing that.
And I'll tell you a quick anecdote. Mr. Jim Love, is he in the back? There he is. He's been very helpful in our legal woes. We had a conference call a month ago now, 2 weeks ago, something like that, with Kaiser Permanente's institutional review board. And it was amazing to participate on that. They have completely clammed up. They were on the phone, and the woman who is the chair of the IRB, who's only one person, nobody else from the IRB was there. She was flanked by several attorneys. She specifically said on the call that she was instructed not to say anything but to listen to what we had to say. And so we ranted and raved, and Mr. Love gave a legal analysis of all the impropriety of this, and she kept saying, well, we did this because, not because of your science, even though the letter, first line, your scientific research results have been debunked. That's how they started off. She said, no, it's concern of, what was it? I don't know, of nothing, basically. I mean, it was a joke. Yeah. So it's been quite a ride. And
it's also interesting that that's not the CDC. You know, this database is so ridiculous. The CDC paid $500 million roughly for this data. So the CDC owns it. We own it. We're the people. We paid. It's our tax money. And now the IRB from one of the Kaisers who supplied it and sold it and took the money now says they don't want to let us work with it. I don't know what the CDC is going to say, but why do we need permission from them when they already sold it to the CDC? We play by the CDC's rules. We haven't been accused of violating their rules. Who are they to even say that? You know, did you sell it or you didn't sell it? They made more money, I think, from selling the data than they did from taking care of the patients.
So, with the government bias as it is, will there be any trouble getting your stuff published?
We're very good at publishing. We are. To pat ourselves on the back, but we are pretty good at epidemiology and pretty good at what we're doing. So we will be able to publish the effects of amalgams and other dental procedures.
They control a few journals, and I'm sure that, you know, pediatrics won't publish it for us. But there's lots and lots of good journals that are not associated with the government, and we've never had trouble. I mean, we can sometimes send something in and they don't like the, you know, they say don't send to this journal, but we've never had a study that we didn't get published within very quick time, and it's not going to happen now.
I'm Dr. Anthony Adams from Clearwater, Florida. I'm not a rookie dentist, obviously, but I am a rookie to this group. So, Dr. Haley, I didn't hear, I totally enjoyed your presentation, but I didn't hear what effect the NMBI has on people who have already been diagnosed with autism.
When we started finding out that this compound had an effect on autism, that was reported by parents of autistic children and medical doctors treating autism. The FDA immediately sent us a letter, told us to quit selling it. So you can get on blog sites and listen to the parents, but we don't have a clinical study on that. They just shut it down and said you could no longer do that. And I would tell you, in the whole time that went on, there wasn't one adverse effect reported, significant adverse effect on the use of the compound. And on our website or to the FDA, this was something that was driven, I think, by the American Academy of Pediatrics that did not want autistic children being treated and treated successfully because it showed that there was some toxin involved in the cause of this disease. So, but I would suggest you go on the blog site and talk to parents that got to use it before it was taken away.
I have just a couple quickies. Basically, on the silver coin analogy for the Romans, why can't vaccine compules have a small strip of silver in them, and that's the only preservative we need?
I have no idea.
Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah. They don't want the single dose.
You've produced a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Single dose syringes are the standard use in vaccines, except in the influenza vaccine. You can buy single doses. They just don't choose to buy them. If you have a single dose, there's no preservative and there's no issue.
Perfect. Now the bottles that go to Africa that we do multi-dose, can that work?
Why do they have to have multi-dose in Africa?
Once again, these are the issues that were from the United Nations.
Well, I can tell you what they said.
Right.
They said that first it costs a bit more, but we've shown that it doesn't, because although the multi-dose vial is a little cheaper than buying 10 single vials. You have to buy syringes, and you have to have somebody fill the syringes, so actually it doesn't cost less. So then they said that the problem is that the single-dose vials take more space in their refrigerators, and they don't have enough refrigeration space. But you understand, most of these vaccines we're talking about are unrefrigerated. So the answer is because they want to. There's no answer to the question. And by the way, you don't need silver. I'm not against silver. But many of our vaccines that are available in multi-dose vials, as well as other places that had thimerosal, now contain 2-phenoxyethanol, which is, not nearly as toxic. It breaks down into alcohol. I attended the UN several times fighting about this, and one of the big shots in the WHO gave a big talk to the Africans, and he said, that group over there says 2-phenoxyethanol can replace thimerosal in vaccines, and it's 50 years away. It's never been used. It's experimental. And as he came off the stage, he said, but sir, over half your vaccines have 2-phenoxyethanol in them today. There are hundreds of millions of doses. And he said, you know that, and I know that, but I can't tell them that. It's an exact quote.
And the second question had to do with the chugging of milk. As most people know, I was twice the size I am now, and I felt the need every night to chug a quart of milk before I went to bed. What was that?
That was craziness. It would be better to go chuggle some almond milk or cashew milk or something, but it's what I have problems with is I tell people, if you want to drink milk, drink sterile milk. And if you want to drink, because if you allow milk, what's the difference between sterile milk and pasteurized milk? Huh? What's the difference? You take pasteurized milk, you bring it up to 160 degrees, you leave it there for a few seconds, and then you cool it back down. Sterile milk, you take it up to 212 degrees, and you leave it there for 20 minutes, and then you cool it down. Basically, what happens is you're selectively making a bunch of, milk that still contains raw, bacteria in it, and and if you allow pasteurized milk to sit in the refrigerator for any length of time, what happens to the milk? It sours, and and it basically, why did it sour? Because it's filled with there's still a lot of live bugs in there. I mean, 1 teaspoon of milk from a cow contains 50,000 white blood cells per each teaspoon of milk. Don't believe for a second that milk that comes out of a cow is sterile. That milk is coming through infected, udders of these cows. That's why so many farmers or so many dairies are constantly giving their cows penicillin shots just to try to keep the udders sterile as much as possible.
What about organic milk?
It's still a problem. Organic, what are you saying? That you want to drink the milk raw? There's nobody out there guaranteeing to you that milk came from a cow that wasn't sick. I mean, the Holsteins that are out there right now, 80% of those cows have got bovine leukemia virus, and it's getting through the milk. Now you tell me, how long do you have to put that milk under heat before you kill that virus? That's why, I'm glad that we have a alternative milk, which would be your soy milk, your almond milk, your cashew milk. I'm glad those milks are out on the market because it gives us an alternative to play with.
Dr. Fletches, what about 7-keto DHEA, and is there any advantage to taking DIM also with that?
7-keto DHEA is the end of the line. That is, it's the very last breakdown product of DHEA, and therefore 7-keto DHEA doesn't do what plain DHEA does. Plain DHEA is a mother compound. It's the mother of all these sex steroids. It's the mother of your pheromones. It's the mother of estrogen. It's the mother of testosterone. And it's the #1 new steroid found in the bloodstream. Well, I'll take that back. What is the #1 steroid in the milk? Huh? Cholesterol. Cholesterol is a steroid. Okay? But the number one adrenal steroid is DHEA. The adrenals make about 50 milligrams of DHEA. You know, in medicine, here's the problem. We have concentrated on knowing a lot about minutia, and we forgot to know a lot about the majors. There's more DHEA produced by the adrenals, but we sure know a lot about cortisone, which is like the production of cortisone by the adrenal is maybe down to 5 milligrams as compared to 35 milligrams by DHEA. I mean, we know about the minutia, but we don't know that much about the major steroid. Go ask any doctor out there on the market and tell them, what does DHEA do? And they'll have absolutely that much knowledge about it. And so, you know, and as you can see, it's one of the main regulators of the T regulatory cells of the immune system, especially where 90% of that immune system is what's governing what's happening inside the gut.
Is there any effect by taking DIM also?
DIM is being used to help decrease estrogen. Is that correct? As far as I know, DIM is a chemical that's being, that comes to us to decrease estrogen. Let me ask you, look, here we have an older male. His testosterone levels are dropping, and then he's, when he was 20, he was making this much estrogen. When he's 70, he's still making that much estrogen. But when he was 20, he was making this amount of testosterone. Now, as he's getting older, the testosterone levels are dropping, but his estrogen remains about the same. Do we want to get rid of that estrogen? Is estrogen an important compound in males? Yes. What does estrogen do inside the male? It stimulates him to make nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is your main vasodilator for the body. And we know from women that if you take away their estrogen, that lack of estrogen in a female, she has problems with increased Alzheimer's. The women who are taking estrogen as they get older are able to hang on to their minds a lot longer than the women who have absolutely no estrogen. Estrogen is good for men. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, quick question. Quick two questions again. Kyers, one time I was watching you speaking to us before, and you said there was a database of 5,000 research papers written on the relationship between vaccinations and autism. Is that available to us?
We were making, I think, a comment in passing about PubMed. You familiar with PubMed? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I had watched you. I think maybe it was last time when you spoke with us, and I saw little bits and pieces of CDC's.
PubMed's from the National Library of Medicine. There's a service. It's PubMed.gov.
Okay.
Where you can go and search for, basically any terms, and we were referring to about thimerosal and mercury and developmental problems. That's what we're talking about, using those key words.
They say there are no papers, and the joke is if you go to PubMed and you type in the word thimerosal and vaccines or anything like that, you get thousands of them. They pop right up. They're available to anybody.
Most of them you'll get abstracts, some full text, some less, but the point is National Library of Medicine, if you're trying to do research, that's a good place to start. If you want to get more in depth, you can also go to Google Scholar. Have you ever used that?
Okay.
Google Scholar is better because you can actually search very often in the text of the article and pull up peer-reviewed studies.
Anyway, the take-home message was that they're lying. I mean, anybody can confirm there are so many papers, it's ridiculous, and they say there are no papers. But many of their researchers don't know what PubMed is, so they don't even research when they write a paper. They don't even put the correct references. If you're going to write a paper, the first thing I taught graduate students, you go to PubMed and you do a series of searches. If there are papers in there that disagree with yours, you can include them in your reference section and explain why you think yours disagrees. To pretend they don't exist is not a research project at all.
It's unethical, too.
Second question to Dr. Haley. Your NBMI, when would you say that would actually become available?
You know, since I don't control the regulatory agencies and how fast they respond to our data, I don't know. We start the phase 2 in about a month. And then it doesn't take very long to do it, but then you have to have it written up, signed off by a bunch of medical doctors who can be very, very slow. Not to be insulting to the doctors on the stage, but they can make things go very, very slow. It drives me crazy. But at the very long, I mean, it should be available in 2018 for certain. But there's a chance it may come out later this year.
Earlier, I sent you some information by the CDC has a database on the water treatment chemical used in every city throughout the United States. It used to be published in a fluoridation census, but of late they have made access to that only if you're a member of the CDC. And I asked David to look and see if there was a way you guys could access it. Did you find out if there's another case of hiding the ball, or is there access to that?
Unfortunately, I remember we were talking about fluoride. I haven't gone further on that, but
we'll continue to investigate.
On the fluoride front, all I can say is if we can get information by county, and this goes even beyond fluoride, any information on that's at a county level can be incorporated into the DVEXI software. So if somebody has a great something or other by county, contact us and we can discuss it.
How about zip code?
Meaning that the patient, we know the county that each of those patients lived in. So you could do a study and specify you want only patients in county A or county B or whatever it is.
If county may be too big, how about zip code?
No, we don't have zip code.
Okay.
Zip code gets problematic about identifying individuals.
Dr. Geyer, any comment on how we can...
I'm not a doctor, just so everybody knows that.
Okay. How can we find out on this measles epidemic, how many were vaccinated?
A lot.
I don't think they're going to tell you that, but they've published various numbers, like 60% were vaccinated and 25% was status unknown. And it's clear that the majority, I don't know the exact number, significant numbers were vaccinated. It's clear, much to my shock, that their vaccine doesn't work very well. You know, we've had some issues about vaccines, and as you probably know, we're pro-vaccine. But gee, I thought if you had measles, you know, the full series, and you had a take, which means you converted, I thought you could shake hands with somebody with measles. But now they're acting like if there's a room full of vaccinated people and one kid comes in who doesn't have measles but is unvaccinated, they're all threatened. I don't think they think their vaccine works very good, and that's something new to me. I thought measles vaccine worked pretty well, and it obviously doesn't. They've also made a tempest in a teapot. I mean, 178 cases. This is quoting them, so I don't believe them. But let's say there's 178 cases. Over a 6-month period, in 50 states, that's 1 case per 3 states per month. You know, no deaths, not 1 death. 11,000 people in the United States die every day of all causes. How does a disease that hasn't got a single death in 6 months continually make the front page when, you know, we're dying of so many other things that nobody cares about, and they're using it as a scare tactic for nothing? I mean, again, they want billions of dollars to force people to take vaccines, and I'm pro-vaccine, but you don't go around lying about this kind of thing. By the way, it's not even a big number. We had 300 and some a few years ago, and they didn't say boo. They just decided this year they were going to make a big deal of it. And oh my God, if only one of them would die. Oh, that would be such a nirvana for them. They'd put them on the front page. They can't get somebody to die. So they have to keep talking about a disease that has no fatalities versus, you know, what is it, 50,000 people die on the highway every year, and hundreds of thousands die of cancer, and hundreds of thousands die of heart attacks, and nobody talks about it, but we got 178 cases of measles, and they're all doing fine, and most of them were vaccinated. Oh my God, we got to force everybody to be vaccinated. It's amazing. And the people go along with it, like sheep.
Dr. Haley, I have a question regarding the approval process. Are you able to disclose under what circumstances the measures of outcome of success for the NBMI will be? What parameters are being evaluated, or what conditions are being treated?
Sure. You got to be very careful what you say.
Sure, I understand.
I mean, with mercury toxicity, we have to have endpoints that we're going to present to the FDA, and somebody much more into the regulatory process has to write that other than myself. But we have to tell them endpoints that we're going to try and see change, such as a drop in urinary mercury level, or an activation of a glutathione S transferase, or the lack of proteins in the urine that are associated with kidney damage. We have to come up with those, and we have to do that, and we have to get the FDA to accept that ahead of time, or the EMA. And we have a clinical research organization. It's certainly not me, it's not my expertise, that's writing that proposal right now. And they've been working with the European Medicines Agency, and hopefully when we do the study on the mercury toxic minors, we'll have these all lined up.
Has the fact that the agent does not hasten the excretion of mercury from the body, has that complicated some of the way that the material has to be evaluated then?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to have a whole paradigm. I mean, the rapid removal of mercury from the body has nothing to do with the ability to inhibit its toxic effects.
Right.
And we're running a job educating, and I can tell you it's not very easy. Even in the European Medicines Agency, we have one person on the EMA board who thinks if you don't get mercury out of the body, you're still sick. Even though we show him the papers time after time and time after time, and he's very adamant that it won't work unless you show that you get rid of the mercury.
Yeah.
But I would tell you, equally as adamant are the younger MDs that were there that were saying, if I don't give a damn if he gets rid of the mercury, not if he can tie it up like selenium does and decrease the toxic effect, I want this compound, I need it. So, you know, there's nothing sane and logical or that you can easily explain in the evaluation process. But we can get them to agree to our endpoints ahead of time before we do the study. And then if it does that, they'll let us, I mean, it's a good chance we'll do it. Plus, it's not just the FDA. I mean, we have the whole South American, the Latin American countries that can decide this on their own.
Okay.
And if it helps their people, they'll be the ones doing a study, so they'll be the ones doing the decision probably.
Would you then caution people like us in describing the material to refrain from using the term chelating agent?
It is a chelating agent.
Okay.
Is this a chelator? That's got nothing to do with how it gets it removed. It just doesn't go out the kidney, which is a big advantage. And a lot of people, medical doctors, see that right away because they see a lot of people who take DMSA and DMPS that end up with toxic kidneys because of the translocation of the mercury from other parts of the body to the kidney.
Dr. Fletcher, will you speak briefly to the correlation between nitric oxide and CO2? If they're both bronchodilators and both vasodilators?
CM2, what is that?
Carbon dioxide, carbonic acid.
Don't know anything about that. Nitric oxide is it's naturally produced by the endothelium of the blood vessels in the body from arginine, especially if you're age 40 or below. Once you get above age 40, the enzymes that convert arginine into nitric oxide go down, And that's where this new product called Neo 40 comes in, because Neo 40 is walking into the body from a backdoor entry point to help the body make nitric oxide. And they are now showing that the nitric oxide being produced by Neo 40 has got the ability to reverse atherosclerosis. So those papers have now been published, and they're keeping on going, but they're continuing to keep doing a lot of research in that area.
Pardon?
I just wondered if you had anything to add for CO2 or carbonic acid, the way it's also a vasodilator.
Carbonic acid is a vasodilator?
Sure.
I don't know too much about that.
Well, it's bicarbonate. pH is buffer the blood a bit. But to back him up, you know, most of you know the last time I gave a talk here, I had a 98% blocked coronary artery. And I've been taking NP40, and I measure my blood pressure. I'm a compulsive, very compulsive and dedicated person. And I can tell you it's lowered my blood pressure and made my health a lot better. It's something, I mean, it really works. And I'm not a nitrous oxide expert either, but it does work. I know the biochemistry of it, but I never worked in it until I needed it myself. I would recommend you try it. If you have high blood pressure, give it a try. Buy yourself a blood pressure cuff.
So I had a few questions for Dr. Haley about the product, the NBMI. Does it bind to mercury when it's elemental or in the +1 state or just the +2?
I will tell you that there isn't a chelate around that binds mercury when it's elemental. It doesn't have any electron. You got to have empty electron sites. It's a form of bond. But none of the sulfur compounds bind mercury without the mercury being charged. I mean, you can get an association and get a metallic bond, but you don't get binding chelation until it's Hg2+. I mean, you look at all the chelators you have in your body: citrate, malate, fumarate, all these organic acids. They don't bind mercury at all. When it's in the vapor form, it just goes through free. I mean, nothing slows it down. When it gets to the Hg2+ form, then it starts binding primarily to sulfur sides, however. But Hg0 does not bind to sulfur very effectively at all.
And the compound gets through the blood-brain barrier? The
Yes.
NMBI with the mercury attached to it comes out of the brain?
It goes in and it comes out. We've measured it in rats. We haven't done that in humans, of course, but I'm pretty sure it'd be the same.
Okay. And you said that when it's bound, the mercury is non-toxic, it's rendered non-toxic. Can mercury really be non-toxic?
Well, mercury to be toxic has to bind to something. Okay. And, you know, once it's bound to NBMI, it can't bind to other proteins or enzymes, and we've tested that extensively. We've made NBMI mercury complex and added it in huge concentrations to enzymes, to cells, and even fed it to rats, and it doesn't cause any toxic effect. I mean, it's inert. You have to heat it to 237 degrees to get it to let the mercury go. So it sequesters it and renders it non-toxic and non-reactive, totally, in every case, in every study we've done. For example, if we put that in the preparation of the NBMI complex, mercury complex, we precipitate it and then I wash it extensively with 100 millimolar phosphate and EDTA buffers to take up any free mercury, and it doesn't dissolve. We don't lose any of the compound because I weigh it before I start and I weigh it at the end of extensive washings, and you can't dissolve it with an EDTA binds mercury with a KD of 10 to the 26th, which means it binds it very tightly in a water solution. And it doesn't pull mercury, even at huge excess, off of the NBMI.
And what about the +1 mercury that's left? Does that convert later to +2? I'm just wondering how we're going to get all the mercury out. So there's the +1 that's still reactive.
Hg+1 gets converted to Hg2+2 very quickly, so it won't stay Hg+1 very long in the body.
Okay. Great.
And Hg+1, I mean, like this compound also binds, as you saw in the data, it sequesters methyl mercury, and thimerosal produced ethyl mercury very effectively.
Okay, great.
So.
Can't wait for it.
Okay.
Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you, AT guys. Just bring beer.